where the technical difficulties abound over and over and over. I swear I'm going to get this right one day, and it's just going to be like nice and smooth, or I'll hire a tech operator or something in it. Anyway, how is everybody doing? We don't have anybody on just yet, but we can just shoot the stuff until they get here. Let me see if I can get. Oh, can we get on chat to make?
Yeah, we'll get on here.
As always, if you guys want to send us lots of money, there will be ways to do that.
We'll
say hi.
Let
me see if I can get one on. So voila. Boom. We now have at least one person watching. And a like. Welcome to Common Mansplaining, everybody. So crazy week. See the pyramids?
That's quite the revelation,
Yeah. So for those of you out there who don't know yet, there was a structure discovered under the pyramids, maybe, right?
Using new ground penetrating. Is it radar? It's not exactly LiDAR, but it's like
it's called SAR. It's called synthetic aperture radar. And what they do is they basically shoot a radar. It's the same stuff that they would use to find topography, right? And it doesn't penetrate very far underground, but what this guy's doing is a new technique, which combines SAR with Doppler, with motions in the ground. So what he's doing is he's reading the vibrations underneath the surface, like 30 centimeters or something down under the surface. And based on the movements in the earth, and you fire many lasers at it, you can see how the stuff moves over time. You can eventually sort of get a feel for what's underneath the ground, right? And so subsurface structures can be determined to an extent that way. I'm not sure exactly how reliable this is yet.
Well, because this is my understanding is that the images are penetrated below bedrock. Like they've seen the pyramid is on bedrock.
Yes.
But below that bedrock, now we see an underground city with pillars supporting the bedrock so that the pyramid doesn't collapse.
Or maybe these are coils that dig deep into the earth and pull energy. Or maybe one thing I heard, which was really interesting, was that it might even be an alchemical plant. That these are pumps; they siphon up water, which is really, really, really crazy.
Some fossil water.
But supposedly, hey Tanya, how's it going? Yeah. So supposedly these are things that these pillars go down 600 meters.
Yeah.
Really, really, really.
Which is more than half a mile.
And then beneath those are these cubical structures, perfect cubes that are supposed to be beneath those, that are either part of a vast city underground, or they're part of a giant alien transformer network or something like that. Something really cool. And of course, what has happened as a consequence is that there's been this huge divide in the scientific world, right? Half of the people in the world are immediately going to this is aliens, it has to be aliens, or some incredible pre-flood civilization like Atlantis.
Pre-flood industrialization, because the mega structures are something there's been a lot of debate about the Giza temple anyway.
Right.
And other temples of its size elsewhere, though they talk about the Mexican temples aren't quite as old.
Yeah.
But
some of them.
Some of them.
Yeah.
Right. And based on what we know about the Egyptians and their understanding, there are questions whether their technology can create structures such as that.
Right.
So obviously this leads to there's a lot of hidden knowledge.
Yes.
A lot of hidden things that the Egyptians had knowledge and sophistication to a much higher level than we knew of. And where did it go? Where did they get it?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things, I actually love digging into Egyptian stuff. And one of the interesting things to know about the Egyptian pyramids, if you don't know already, is that the oldest pyramids are the biggest, the most difficult to construct, and using materials that are much more complicated to cut into. The newer pyramids are much smaller, much easier to make. Like it's basically weaker construction, right? It's like it'd be like if you went to New York and you saw like the new Twin Towers building, and that was the oldest building, and then you saw one of their old like crappy brick buildings was like the stuff that we made today. It just wouldn't make any sense, right? And there's a similar thing that's going on with their pottery. Like they have a bunch of ancient Egyptian pottery. So they say it's like pre-dynastic ancient Egyptian pottery that's like where they carved somehow into red granite. Like red granite is one of the hardest stones on earth. Like
you need carbide or diamond.
Yeah, you'd need like a drill bit with like and like you'd have to have like almost an industrial like thing. And so what some people have guessed is hypothesized is that maybe they had this really like this really cool like melting technique where they could like put like a rod that was like essentially superheated into the stone and melt part of it away or something like that. I don't know.
Melting granites.
But right, this is like that's like thousands of degrees, right? Like
that seems harder than drilling it out with.
Hey, you never. I don't know how because they don't have. They say they don't have
just
drills.
To make a pot. Like it's like
right. And there's I mean there's so much stuff like in the Egyptian
crocodiles lasers on there.
Yeah. There's a thing. There's a place where you can go where you can see where the Egyptians quarried some of their stones. And one of the coolest things that you can go to is that there's this huge, like enormous, like limestone block that was in the process of being cut to be an obelisk somewhere, but they just never used it. And so like you can go in and like walk around it, but it's like 30 tons or 50 tons. It's like enormous, like out absolutely one of the biggest rocks that's ever been cut out. And if you go in, like you can see these like places where they like have some kind of like it's got to be a machine, like it's like a scooping mechanism, like a steam shovel or something. Basically, would have had to like cut out from underneath the rock because humans couldn't make the marks that they're looking at, not without like modern day like literally laser technology. Could you do that? So it's insane. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that the Egyptians had that we don't know about. The pyramids themselves, the standard narrative is that they are tombs for the Egyptian pharaohs, and yet we have never discovered any dead bodies or any remains of any dead bodies in these pyramids. We've never discovered a tomb, right? They say it's a tomb.
There are lots of tombs,
right,
in other places, but not in the Great Pyramid,
right? And there's like there's granite chambers, where I guess you could put a body in it, but there's never been anything found that had any kind of like remains that you can date. And so like many of the what archaeologists will call pseudoscientists, right? Because they're not part of the club, right? Many of the people that look at these pyramids, they surmise that it might be something else, might have been used for something else, like a power plant, like an alchemical plant. I saw this incredible thing the other day where this guy he walked through one of the pyramids and he showed like various places where there were different like shades on the rock indicating different chemicals that could have influenced the rock and stuff and like caused different sorts of erosion and burn marks and stuff like that. And he described that it could have been like this essentially a pressure pump that pumped water into this like pressurized chamber and it would have worked. He said like had you done it, you could like essentially make what he thought would be something like ammonia, like a soap that way, which is
fertilizer,
right? Fertilizer could be a lot of things used for a lot of different things. I'm not saying that that's what this was, but I just think it's fascinating that there are all these different things that the Egyptians could have been doing with these pyramids that I think probably weren't even actually made by the dynastic Egyptians, right? This is my theory.
And the Egyptians moved there and found them abandoned.
Right. And now here's another thing that's interesting. I could probably talk about this all day. It's my favorite stuff. But another thing that's interesting is that I don't know, for those of you who, let's see, so I wonder what they're doing with it. Yeah. So the trick with this new knowledge is what they're doing with is there's two sides, right? One side is they immediately jump to the conclusion that this is all real and that it's all like proof of some kind of early pre-flood civilization or something. I don't know that we're there yet.
Technology, yeah.
I don't know that we're there yet. Like I've seen the raw data, and the raw data is, It's fuzzy. It looks like a sonogram, right? Like
Well,
it's a Doppler.
It's interesting enough to make us want to
Yes.
do more and actually go down there and see what that, what's actually there.
Right.
Right. Because you would expect in the desert or under a structure that's built on bedrock to find more bedrock.
Right. Right. And if there's something else, now one of the other side of this coin, right? The big archaeologists, like the establishment group, are going to immediately poo-poo it. They're going to say, no, this is just all garbage. It's BS. It's not possible that this actually exists like this. And wah. And they won't go check it out, which to me makes no sense. Like, right? Like if you're a scientist and someone tells you, hey, look, we've got evidence. This is scientific evidence, by the way. These are published scientists.
Just tell the British there's something down there that belongs in the museum.
Right.
They'll find a way.
That would work. That's a good idea, actually. It's really. But yeah, so meanwhile, these are published scientists, the guys with the SAR radar, right? They've done science work before. This is a new technique, but these are like serious guys who've probably published, 20, 30 papers a piece. And now they're saying like, no, we don't even want to look. It's all garbage. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, just if you think that it's garbage, go out there and prove them wrong. That's how science is supposed to work, right? All we need to do is drill a little hole in it, stick a camera and a light down there, and we'll find out real quick, right? Like, we're like, oh, look, that's how
a sandrachoscopy.
I love it. Right. Like you seem to like this would be the easiest thing in the world to check out. And it won't damage the pyramids. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's like you can do it. They've done it like 50 times or something in the Giza Plateau where they've dug in or drilled in just to check something. Not usually under the pyramid, but
they don't let you climb the pyramids anymore.
They'll let you know.
They used to. I mean, it's like, what, you're going to hurt these 4,000-year-old rocks?
Yeah, right. Well, they're probably afraid that you're going to fall and bust your own neck.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know. But so the other thing I was going to tell you about the pyramids is really cool. This is called the Orion theory, or like something called have you heard about this?
No.
So the original location of the pyramids, if you were to match it up with the Nile River is right by the Giza Plateau. And if you were to assume that the Nile River is the arm of the Milky Way, the galaxy, right? Mm-hmm. And the position of the pyramids is essentially they match Orion's belt, right? Like perfectly.
What time of year?
Here's the key. The key. It matches perfectly 13,000 years ago, right when the flood happened.
Yeah.
So that's if you siphon back time to 13,000 years ago with the precession of the equinoxes and stuff, you'll have 13,000 years ago. You'll have that exact configuration on the plateau, but not just those. Also, like many of the other structures around there that date back to the same time match. And the constellation Leo, which would have been overhead as the sun rises, like so using like astrology, ancient astrology, the zodiac, as the sun rises, you'd see the lion of the constellation Leo. It would have been right there, right over the Sphinx, who most people think was actually originally just a lion, not a Sphinx, right? And they think that the Sphinx was carved after some kind of mistake was done to the Sphinx. And there's a lot of other proofs. Like you guys should look this up because it's really cool stuff. But there's a lot of other proof. Like for example, the erosion on the side of the Sphinx indicates that it would have had to have happened like through heavy rain or extensive amounts of flooding, which couldn't have happened in the desert, right? It would have had to have happened long, right? Pre-ice age when there was still. That's when the Sahara was a lush and fertile zone and had tons of rain. So, but anyway, this stuff is awesome. I could talk about this for the rest of my life.
Well, it's really interesting because there's ideas that certain facts have been suppressed by elites because they don't have easy answers for them.
Right.
So what they can tell. So anything that they can trace to essentially the Egyptian culture that maybe came in and inherited Egypt after and found these structures already built, they're happy to jump on board with that.
Right.
Right. But anything anachronistic or anything pre, Egyptians, right, what we would call Egyptians, they just suppress that. And
Right.
so and we don't have access to the Smithsonian archives, the British Museum archives, or whatever. And so this type of thing gives us just a little taste of something that maybe they have known about and been trying to suppress, things that don't fit a narrative.
Yep.
So that I think is the most interesting thing is just the elites can't control the inquisitiveness, and we need to see stuff that they can't explain. And they're like, here's something we can't explain. Look, we need to see that.
Right.
Just because you don't have an answer that you can't look smart and explain doesn't mean that we can't look at it.
Right. And yeah, I don't understand. There's so much resistance today. Like we talked about this in one of our other episodes, like with the mainstream archaeology narratives being, the Clovis Indian tribe came across the Americas first, and they weren't first. They weren't second. They weren't even third. This is one of those things where anytime you try to challenge that mainstream narrative, right? This is anytime something comes up and somebody says, "Hey, this might have been before Egyptian," and they're like, "Oh no. The Egyptians were the first people that ever did this stuff here," and it's like I don't even understand why it's that big of a deal. Like, just go find out, right? Like, none of the ancient Egyptians from 5,000 years ago are alive today to be offended. Like let's just find out.
It's all Arabs that live in Egypt.
Yeah, right. So. Anyway, switching gears a little bit, because I could talk about this for the next 7 hours, and I'd still be happy. But switching gears a little bit, what do you think about our situation with Canada?
So Canada has they're running have an election.
Yes.
Right. And what we know, anytime a democracy, anytime there's running, politicians are going to say stuff that they think will help get them elected. So whether it's what they really feel or whether they will back up stuff, but Canada's election rhetoric right now is very anti-US.
Right.
Saying that their relationship with the US is done. And but right, so I'm still a little bit, and they're blaming Trump that we blew up this thing, because we've had a bad week with Canada.
Yeah.
Like, foreign policy is not just like something that happens in a week.
Right.
It's not just one news cycle.
Thank you.
And I know that people are looking for any negative for Trump because Doge and other things have been going so well, and they want to jump on any sort of negative. So hey, there's this world leader that doesn't like Trump. They act like this is big news, like we should care.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Why should I care?
But it's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. And what what drives me nuts, and this is what we've been talking about for like basically the past week, is Canada has been taking advantage of America even since before the war. Really, literally all of Canada's existence is owed to America. Almost every, I mean, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic maybe, but like not that much. Like literally their entire, because it's cold up there. It's like a frozen wasteland. Like literally there's just nothing up there of note. The only reason they're able to exist is because of the goods and the trade that America provides, because they're not self-sufficient, right? This is the big thing that people keep missing, is that America doesn't need anyone. We don't need anyone. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want to have friends. I like friends. Friends are nice and fuzzy and warm. I like cuddling with people. Like friends are great, but we don't need it, right? Canada needs us. We don't need Canada, right? And all this while, they have been tariffing the life out of us so that they can basically seal us out of their market and make their market more stable, because they can keep their logging industry going. They can keep their maple syrup industry going. They can keep all their
dairy,
right, the dairy, their fur skins and stuff like that, all the stuff that they're known for or whatever. And they want to seal us out of it. But we have plenty of cows here in America that we could be, should probably cheaper than their stuff, right? Probably easier to produce because it's not a frozen wasteland. And there's plenty of things that we have plenty of logging resources that we could acquire here in America that, again, cheaper. We don't have to use them for that stuff. We don't. We do it because we're being nice. And not only do they tariff the daylights out of us, there's a huge trade deficit. Like we're buying a lot more from them than they're buying from us, right? Which is basically like us basically subsidizing their economy.
Well, I mean, granted, there's 25 million Canadians.
Yeah.
And so of course, like they can't buy as much as we can consume in the country. But I think, yeah, obviously there's a system, there's this fairness that Trump wants to negotiate back, and that Canada has kind of felt like they can treat us one way, um, and then freeload off us, right? They don't have to pour any money into national defense because you've got the best army the world has ever seen,
Right.
right there, and with the doctrine that if people were to militarily try to invade North America, we would be interested,
Yeah.
right? So they don't even have to formally like be a part of that. They just sort of get the blessings of our proximity, and then they can ridicule us because our healthcare isn't free, right? So they can pour stuff into. Obviously, there are problems with the Canadian left, like there were problems with the American left.
Yeah.
But the difference is the Canadian left has ruled there much more without interruption.
Right.
While here we've had at least equal time for Republican and Democrats, and our system allows for divided government.
Yeah.
So even the most extreme parts of the left, they can talk big game, but as far as implementing stuff, getting it through a divided Congress helps mitigate that. Canada is able to basically enact a lot of very far left stuff.
They want.
And so we've kind of seen where it wants to go. And this is, I think, should be a warning for us out there that if we let the left govern without resistance, without alternative, without common sense, you get Canadian government where common sense goes to die. And no free speech. You get repression of free speech. Anybody speaks out against this. But right now, I think the hullabaloo, the politicians talking good game, because you don't want somebody who's cowed by America leading your country, and so they feel like it'll give them good votes.
Right.
Once the election's done, we'll see where we're at. For right now, I'm not going to put as much stock into it as the left are, though they certainly do want to spin this as anything negative or a debacle that Trump has created.
Of course.
We're not there.
Yeah. There's a new guy out on the scene, Pierre. I'm gonna butcher his last name, Poilievre or something like. Anyway, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's a new. They call him the Canadian Trump. I'm hoping he makes things happen. He's an underdog, but he stands a chance. So and because Trudeau was so wildly unpopular, I think maybe they're going to be ready for a change. But it's like Christian said, we here in America, we're blessed with the Constitution. We have a constitutional republic. We have, thankfully, it has been the bedrock of our nation, is what has kept us from just like zooming away from these principles, right? We set these principles in stone
into leftist fantasy land.
Yeah, right. And so like you go to Canada or Britain or something, they don't have that, and that's why you now see people getting like fined and arrested for tweeting something, or like talking out on social media. If that happened here in America, I would lose my mind. Like I would literally go nuts. I'm not a violent man, but holy cow. And I mean, I would lose it. And so thankfully we've got that in America. So that's holding us. It's like an anchor to a tether to reality. And Canada doesn't have that. Canada needs to get one of those. They need to acquire some way to like establish a set of principles and guidelines by which they rule. And right, like Christian said, they've got all the things in the world going for them. They don't have to buy a national defense. We do it for them. I think the only thing they've even got is like a small special forces team. That's it. Like the rest of Canada's military is just like unimportant.
But Rat Moose is to save skills.
right on Moose.
Right. One of the things Canada even. They were going to build this huge pipeline from the oil fields in Alberta all the way across Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario. But then they're like, oh, we can just use this one already existing goes through the U.S.
Of course.
Right? So that goes down through the Great Lakes into Ohio and stuff like that. So it saved them the time to do it. They could just use the US. So obviously, if they think their relationship is over, they can start putting barrels of oil
Yeah.
in trucks or on trains if they want to get it
Not going to be
from
using our pipeline
from
anymore,
Alberta to Ontario.
right? Do they pay us for that? I'm sure they pay us a small amount, right, for like maintenance.
I'm not sure how much you're being paid, but it's definitely a type of relationship.
Right.
Because even if that stuff it transverses through America, but then ends up in oil refineries in Toronto, in the lower Orlando or Ontario area. So we're just transporting it for them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I spent a long time over the last week talking to a friend of mine who's like literally horrified at this whole situation. They're losing their mind. They're like, "Oh my gosh, we're sacrificing our relationship with our closest friend, Canada." And I'm sitting there thinking, like, you mean like closest, like geographically, like yeah, like they're like closest to us on a map. Yes, of course they border us. I don't understand what exactly they're doing for us as a friend. What do we get out of this relationship? Like, it is literally a parasitic relationship. No offense, but like that's how I feel. Canada has leached off us. They have leached off of our economy. They have leached off of our defense. They've leached off of everything American stands for. And what do we get out of this relationship? Nothing. Nothing. I literally, if World War III happened tomorrow, I would not be like, "Oh, thank God, Canada's going to save us riding in on mooses." Like,
yes.
like I just they don't do anything for us.
Yeah.
They literally give us nothing. They help us none. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd love to have a relationship with them that is actually mutually beneficial. I'm down with that.
Somebody said that they vote with us in the UN 74% of the time.
Oh, great. So does everybody else in the UN, because we're the UN. Like we were NATO. Like the fact that somebody else does what we tell them to do is not surprising, right? Even after they hate us, they're probably going to still vote what we vote 74% of the time, because we're the biggest and the strongest, and they don't have any choice, right? Like what? And if they don't, we'll just be like, all right, we'll leave. Like we'll just dip out. But interestingly, I'm ex-military, as you guys know. I was playing a lot of these like war games recently, and I mean like real war games, right? So like there's a lot of different channels online where you can go and see strategists, like real strategists, like Colonel Douglas MacArthur or other people like that will strategize out, game out different scenarios. And currently, it is thought that with Russia's weakness and some other things going on, that America would actually win in a war against everybody else on Earth. Like we could theoretically, if we had to. Not knock on wood. I don't want it. I don't want this to happen.
Germany like took on the world.
Yeah, we could literally, we would literally win. We would win the entire encounter against the world. The only if is China. Like China's kind of an unknown, but we think that presently we would beat everyone all together.
If it wasn't nuclear, a non-nuclear.
If it was nuclear, also, although everybody would lose if it was nuclear. But yeah, because we've got enough nukes to by ourselves to kill the planet. I think it only takes like a couple hundred, by the way, like to like end the planet for a while.
We'll see.
Like not to kill like cockroaches and bacteria, but like all humans would be dead in if you drop a few hundred nukes, you'd just too much fallout or something like that.
If there are a few hundred thermonuclear nukes in Central Asia, would it really bother us?
Just saying. Yeah, it would carry across nuclear winter. Wow. Hopefully not. I don't want this to ever happen, guys. I do not want anybody else to.
I'm being glad.
I don't want, and I'm being hyperbolic with this whole thing. But it is true that I watched a war game and we did win. Like it's AI operated, right? So the AI makes its educated guesses about who would win.
Like, all right, one Marine can kill 1,000. What? Canadian troop.
Oh, it's just it's our technology is just so far. Like the problem is the way we dominate the sea, right? Nobody can really get to us. We've got the oceans between us. We dominate all the corridors between us and anybody else. We can start like sealing off these like Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, the Malacca Strait, like all of the other places. We can just start blockading the whole world. which is we can't do it all at once necessarily, but we can do sections at a time and try to like siphon out people. And then of course, the toughest game is going to would always be China because they have a good missile stockpile. But other than that, like we could go in, we would have to attack them directly very quickly, like and try to wipe
The
them out.
unknown is when we institute a draft.
Oh yeah.
Oh, this just volunteer military.
Oh no, we could do it now, but we would also
All right, so then what do you think about Greenland?
Yeah, Greenland.
Mike or JD Vance in Greenland. He said nobody told me it would be this cold in April.
It's not that green in Greenland. It's always funny. I've always thought it one of those like why do you park on driveways and drive on parkways, right? Like this is one of those things like why is Greenland icy and why is Iceland greeny? Like I've never figured that one out.
Propaganda. Ancient Viking propaganda. But yeah, because it's quite balmy. We're in the Mid-Atlantic states here in North Carolina, and
good propaganda.
Oh man. But and the cherry blossoms are out, so DC is beautiful. So it's like, oh sure, I'll take a little trip. Holy cow! It's like going back in time 3 months, and he's like, so obviously Greenland doesn't offer spectacular spring weather,
right?
But their interest, right?
Nor does Canada.
Yeah, but they're a small population, probably fewer people. Less than 90,000 people live in Greenland. So the logistics of governing it would be much more in our favor or than Denmark's right now. But it's interesting. They, of course, don't like Trump, right? And MAGA. And
so they say. I think there's a group that's on board with it, but it's just like.
Well, right. There's sort of like this German word and sort of a European thing. It's like you're right, but you're being an a-hole or something like that. And they can see, the Trump's right about Greenland and things, but his mannerism, his brusque nature, right? But it's something to be reevaluated, especially because Denmark is basically and Greenland are freeloading off our national security, and we're saying like, hey. Give us some interest, give us something in here.
Right. This is all I say. All I've ever wanted is for this to be a reciprocal relationship. And we've talked about this a million times on the channel too. It's like if you somebody's had their hands out and you just keep on feeding them over and over and over again. It's like teach a man to fish, right? Like at some point in time, if you just keep catching fish for somebody, there's something weird that happens with their psychosis where they actually assume that you owe them fish. And I'm not sure how it happens or why it happens psychologically. I've been careful never to get that way in my life with anybody, right? Like I try and I'm very cognizant of it. So if I see that myself begin to act entitled, I immediately slap myself down and say, no, that's rude, that's selfish, right? But in the gambling world that I'm in, and it happens all the time. In apparently in statecraft, it does too, because here we have a situation where America's been giving and giving and giving and giving and giving, and then the moment we're like, hey, can we just get a little bit back, just a little bit back for shipping security for the world, for being a police force?
We're saying like, can we split the check? We'll still pay 75%.
Right?
And you're like.
Yeah, like why 25% of the check? Like what? And like we're talking about just like little itty bitty things here. Like, can we get a mineral deal? Can we just, can you guys put up 2% of their GDP toward the defense fund to protect your borders, not ours, your borders, right? Like you're the ones that are worried about Russia. We don't give a crap, right? It just doesn't matter. Now, don't get me wrong. We're there for you, but can we just get you to just meet us just like 18% of the way in or like 15% of the way? Come on, just.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's not talked about here is one of the oppositions is environmentalists are afraid of industrializing
Greenland,
right? That them having real cars and real roads and real industry in Greenland where they can actually produce something rather than being a burden. They're terrified of that. And the right is not. We want to make things productive. We want to develop things and bring them where you can contribute and you don't have to be a parasite.
Yeah, there's one of the things that people used to whine about too. They used to say that like, oh no, the world's going to be overpopulated. That's all I heard growing up. Like we I think when I was young, very young, we had like 6 billion people, and then like we quickly moved to like 7, and then 7.5 in school, and they were like, at this rate, we're going to be at 10 billion in no time, and then there'll be too many people on Earth, and we'll all die. And I'm like, I don't know about that. So anyway, fast forward a couple of years, and now we're actually facing the opposite crisis, right? Demographics are starting to collapse, and there's just too few people. We're not replacing ourselves. But even so, because of the once period of time where we were growing and growing and growing, it got to the point where a lot of people did a lot of research, and they're like, well, what if there's more people? Will we be able to handle it? It actually, the studies show that the more people we have, the more industry we have, the more innovation we have, the more creativity we have, the more like unique answers to these problems we have, we actually grow our ability to provide resources for ourselves faster than we grow population. So it's like, you might think it's like, oh no, we're taking all the resources of the earth. No, there's a lot of resources in the earth, a lot. And as we get bigger and bigger and more innovative, we actually like come up with these wacky ideas. Like I saw this building the other day that was like a building of plants. Like it was like, instead of having like one layer of like a farm, it was like a farm and then a farm and then a farm and then a farm. And I was like, holy cow, that's awesome, right? Like this is cool. Like I love that kind of geoengineering. I love that there's so many different answers that we can bring to bear on a variety of different topics. It's not a bad thing to industrialize ever. And it only puts people from like poverty into wealth.
Well, we've had these industrial miracles time and time again where we've reached this population thing, and then boom, all of a sudden, a stalk of corn that used to produce 1 ear now produces 2. We just double our food supply.
Say what? Okay. Here.
Right, and that we've been able to double and increase our food production. What people get is, right, they look at a place like Jakarta or very desirable places like Buenos Aires, and like, oh, everybody needs to live here. But the next wave is actually rural, right? I mean, probably I think somebody said you could put 4 billion people in the state of Texas and put them in 2,000 square foot houses on 6,000 square foot lots.
It'd all be fine.
And get pretty much like house just in Texas. Like it's just when we look at these scarce places that are geographically limited, port cities, places like San Francisco. But that's not the real world. Those are the exceptions. Those are unique opportunity things. As long as people don't want to live in Jakarta, don't need to live in Tokyo, right in the heart of Tokyo, then they're going to be okay. In fact, now Japan, even in Tokyo, you can get, as long as you're willing to renovate a property, you can pretty much get anything.
Yep.
For very affordable. They need people.
Yeah, and there's still places that are like all over the world. There are places that would just love to have a little bit of industrialization. They're just dying. Like, okay, I took a trip to the Dominican Republic not too long ago for, I think it was my honeymoon, right? Mm-hmm. It was a while ago, but not too long ago, right? And the Dominican Republic, it was so poor there, and I felt terrible. Like I felt awful. It was so poor there that like kids would actually run up and try to pickpocket seashells into your pockets so that they could run down the street and tell the cops that you stole them and make you pay. Like that's how bad it was. Like it was. And meanwhile, like we're walking down the road, and most of the houses are like more poorly constructed than I could build a treehouse in my backyard. Like this stuff was just, I felt terrible. It's like just pure squalor. And I'm like, it would take one person like $80,000 to improve the entire island. Like everybody else would have like a better treehouse, right? And then all of a sudden everything would be better. But I don't understand why it just takes so little effort in the industrialization phase to like convert an entire, like we could fix Haiti and Dominican Republic overnight with that kind of stuff. We could fix a million different places with just a little bit of like engineering, a little bit of like,
Corruption. Corruption is always the barrier,
right.
not the know-how. But the DR has come up a lot, and because they've tried to deal with and combat corruption, and we'll see things improve. Basically, as you become more honest, then we can trade with you. You know, we
Right.
don't feel like we can invest in your country because you're not going to steal it back. So there, you know, people are learning these economic lessons, but it really comes down to, right, be honest, work hard,
Right.
make things that are as good as they can that people actually want to consume, and there are no shortcuts.
That's it.
And you've got to work really hard. Everybody that went through an industrialization went through a hardship, right? You don't just skip to the end and you know you're in Park Avenue. You have to go through some school. Have generations that have to work really, really hard to make the next generation better.
Speaking of working really hard, guys, we're working really hard on this channel. I am like literally putting in hours and hours and hours and hours, and I just want to tell you, each and every one of you, how much I appreciate your viewership. All three of you that are watching, I think, at the moment, and I want to tell
your friends.
Tell your friends about us. Like we're working our hardest to try to get this thing off the ground. It is definitely not easy. Competition on YouTube is insane. It's like insane, and there's a lot of like new bot channels that are like just cranking out videos like you wouldn't believe. So we need more than ever for you guys to try to come through for us, like and subscribe, share this with your friends, share this with your family, and help us get off the ground. You got anything else on your radar today?
Nothing that has really agitated me. I guess those are the things that interest me and upset me.
That's the big stuff. Yeah, the pyramids. As long as everybody realizes the pyramids probably means that there was aliens. You know, we're all good to go. And
but they left. They got what they wanted and left. I guess.
Matt says no such thing. What are you talking about? Of course, there's aliens.
The aliens are what made the Sahara Desert. If it wasn't aliens, the Sahara Desert would still be.
Angels.
Beautiful.
Angels are probably can qualify as aliens, don't they? I don't know. Anyway, but guys, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on Common Mansplaining.